Have you ever had the problem of going for the nose ride, but you're just missing with your foot landing behind the nose? This week, we had a great question from our viewer Sam, asking for any tips for when you land too close to the nose for the cross step, but too far to just move your leg out to the hang five. This is a really common problem, and one that can be frustrating if we don't know exactly how to correct for this. This is in large part due to a lack of structure and framework that's usually put in place to solve this problem. And I find that by simply applying some objectivity to this and putting some actions in place, we can go a long way to more consistently hitting the nose. This is tip time, now let's get into it. Okay, welcome back to another segment of Tip Time, where we take a deep dive into your questions. Thanks very much to Sam for the question. If anyone else has any questions for future tip times, we do these weekly on a Wednesday, so please leave them in the comments below and we can get to those next time. So if we're just to outline and address the problem a little bit more, so this is typically a problem when we're approaching the nose, and for those last two steps, we don't get that front foot hanging over the nose. So we don't get those 5 toes over the nose for the hang 5, and it lands a little bit short. This is a really common problem. It happens all the time. And there are a few things that we can put in place to correct this. I do find though that if we're just hoping to get our front foot there and we're only focusing on it for that last part, or essentially in those last 2 cross steps, this is where we can have a bit of a problem. But by putting some good practice in place and following a couple of sort of objective measures or objective things that we can try and follow, it does go a long way to really help with this. And touching on that just a little bit more, if we're just working on things in the water and we're not putting the structure in, applying this when we're going for the nose ride is a really tricky thing, because firstly, we're doing something that's pretty tricky anyway. So we're going for the nose ride, which might be an uncomfortable thing to do, or it might be something that you're just learning. And so putting something new or thinking about another thing on top of that already is going to be extremely difficult. And then if we're just practicing it in the water, again, it's an environment that's always changing. So there are some things to put in place to make sure that we can do it in an easier environment, and then some things that we can do to make sure that we're not doing it at the most or the trickiest part, and when we're most off balance as well. So for the first thing here, you probably got it from what I was saying before, but I really like land practice for this. Anything cross-stepping wise and anything nose ride wise, I think positioning, we can do a lot on land. So I think we'll speak through how to go about this first. A lot of what we're doing, and we can think about this as maybe a little bit of a spacing problem. And so we're landing a little bit too far back, or we're not cross-stepping far enough to land our next 2 steps or our last 2 steps close enough to the nose. And so we have to really stretch out kind of like a cheetah 5 if we are to get there at all. And so what we're going to do on land is we're going to make sure that we're using, again, take the fin out of the board, make sure there's something soft underneath your board, so that you don't damage the bottom of it. But you're going to try and pop up just where you normally would, and then you're going to practice your cross steps and just try to space out exactly the right amount of distance to get to the nose. Once you're doing this a little bit, it'll feel a bit more comfortable. And I guess what we're looking for is to translate this feeling, so what you can do on land, to the water. Again, it's much easier to focus on this on land because you can make those corrections. You can step back and go, oh wait, that wasn't right. Let's make this first step a little bit bigger. Let's make the next step a little bit bigger, and so on. So essentially, we're just trying to establish a really nice foundation, a really nice, I guess, patterning of how this feels on land, so that we can translate that, move it into the water, rather than just trying to go for the water straight away, which can be really, really tricky. So the next step that we're going to put into place here is maybe one of the most important things that we say in this video, and it's the wax method. So it's actually where we're going to put an objective marker on our board for one of the steps that we make. Now, the step I like to use, or the step I want to make sure that I'm marking out so that we land the foot in the correct position, is that second last step, or that back foot when you're nose riding. Now, the reasoning for this is if we don't get that back foot right when we're nose riding, then that's what's going to put us out of place for landing too far away from the nose. So we either have to try and stretch that foot out even further, and as Sam was saying, we can't get that foot quite far enough out, and so we're unable to get there anyway, or we get it too far up the nose and it's a little bit off balancing. So what I want to try and work on with you, so this can work really well with your land practice as well, is figure out the ideal scenario or the ideal spot where you're going to be placing that back foot so you can stretch that foot out. Pop that wax mark on there, so make sure that that's nice and visible. Should be a very solid white line that you can see on your board. You can do it another way if you want to use tape or anything like that, but I think a wax mark is the best way to go about it. What we're going to do from there is, through our land practice, we're going to practice spacing out those first 2 steps with that line in mind. So you want to be landing far enough forwards so that you're very comfortable to bring that back foot or that second last step onto that line. Okay, so for the first 2 steps, you've got an objective marker of where you want to be close to. From here, on the second last step, this is where we plant that foot onto that line or onto that wax mark that you've placed on, and then next step should be easy. What we're going to do is just going to pop that toe forward so that we can easily land on the nose. So it's really simple, but just by having that objective marker for where you're going to make sure you're landing that back foot for the Noseride, I find this resolves a lot of issues. You've got an objective marker to look at when you're out in the water, which is great because it leaves less for, trying to think of things in the moment, which is tricky when you've got a lot going on with the wave and trying to make it to the nose. It just makes it that little bit simpler. So I think that'll be a really good thing for you to try. Practice it on land to begin with, and then transition that into the water, and I think you'll have some pretty good success with that. Okay, and for our final step today, this is just a little bit of an add-on, but I think it is really, really useful, especially if we're thinking about the fact that we can reposition that back foot or reposition that front foot, depending on where the front foot's landing. So if you are landing a little bit shy of the nose, we can to some degree shift it forwards. So actually, we've got that ability to move it forwards if it's not landing in the right place straight away. But what we need to do here is make sure that our weight is back over that back foot. If we've got most of our weight hunched over that front foot when we're nose riding, it is a really, really tricky way, or it's a lot trickier to make sure that we can then shift that weight forwards, because what we'll need to do is shift our weight onto the back foot, reposition the front foot, and then put more weight on it, rather than what we should kind of be doing anyways, which is keeping the weight over the back foot, and then we can just slide or poke, you might have heard me say that before, poking that front foot forwards towards the nose, and we can reposition that quite easily if we don't have a lot of weight there. So just making sure that a lot of that weight stays on the back foot when you're nose riding, and you're just able to then steadily poke or slide that front foot forwards as far as you need to so that it is 5 toes over the nose. All right, so nice and quick one today. I hope that you found that useful. So just to recap there, we've got the land practice that is really going to help with, consolidating how comfortable you feel with the spacing of your cross steps. The second part is going to be that wax method, where we're placing the wax line clearly on the board, so you know how far to cross step for the first 2 steps to position yourself nice and close to that line, and that second last step of the nose ride, where the back foot when you're nose riding is going to be landing, coming right onto that line, so that again we can easily place our foot on that line and then have confidence that we've got enough space or we're in the right position to easily place that right foot or the front foot further forwards straight onto the nose. And then that last part is just going to be weight onto the back foot. So if by chance we don't get that front foot landing 5 toes over, we can slide that forwards as we need to. So I think we'll leave it there for that one. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you got a bit out of it and that you can apply this to your surfing and your practice and everything like that. As I said at the start, if you have any questions for future tip times, we do this weekly. So leave them in the comments below. I'll have a read through, have a bit of a chat with you about them. And yeah, we can get to those in the next one. Other than that, we've got the Sunday glide coming up this Sunday as well, as usual, and I think we'll leave it there. So thanks very much for watching. Hope you guys are getting waves, and we'll see you in the next one. You.